bee pollen and cross-pollinate it.
Oh, dude.
Try to make a green dragon.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome, welcome.
The fresh dragon fruit cookies from this morning. So that's why it's so crazy, because we're busy with doing other things. Oh, the cutting exchange. Oh, okay, so you're doing a cutting exchange, leaving your car. Yeah, I thought you were giving it.
No, that's okay.
When you work on the dragon fruit, like from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, that's not.
Yeah.
Get some coffee, dude.
Here we go.
You want just a test or you want a full?
Full. Let's enjoy. Dragon fruit, lemonade, and mint.
Right now, so you guys are basically here, right? Okay, so grafting. What is the purpose of grafting? Grafting is to help speed up the growth of dragon fruit. For example, let's say this cutting I had here didn't have roots, right? But I have all these root stalks here with established roots already. And if you guys grow dragon fruit, you guys know how stressful, or sometimes it could be very easy to grow roots, and sometimes some don't make it, and sometimes some take so long. To speed that up, because the downtime to wait for roots could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, even like a month, right? So what this does is it has an established root stock already. So when you're grafting it on there, they basically don't have to do any rooting. They just grow from there on out, right? So that's one way to speed the growth of dragon fruit. So if you guys start practicing, and let's say like you go to a store, you find a fruit with a stem on it, you guys can take that stem and do a clone graft. Like if you guys can do like a V graft, I have a V graft right here. So this is an example of me taking a fruit from a store. So you guys want to see, this is the V graft here. A lot of the time people don't like two-sided branches, right? They're ugly, they think they don't produce fruit. I actively look for these now because they're so easy to graft on. Before, I used to do V grafts on the sides where I would cut a node and stick them right here. And they would be like a 70% chance if they're gonna latch on, and then sometimes it takes longer because they have to build those veins to start pushing on a node. With this one, it was directly on top of that camel layer. You guys know that camel layer, the circle inside of the core, the woody part? So what I did was I took the fruit, I cut off a thorn with this tool I have here. And this is just like a rubber sealing tool, like it's a window tool. You guys can get this like on Amazon, on eBay. It's really cheap, like $6-7. And it has holes in here so you can see where you're cutting. And what I do is I just, take this here, cut it, save that piece, and then I find the camia in here. Once you cut it, you guys can see like the white part, and then that's where I did the V graft here. So that's one way to graft. Another way to graft that I first introduced to the internet was the cleft graft, because this was just the easiest one to do. Like it was just like mash the camel layer, wedge it in, and tape it as tight as you can, right? So this is the cleft graft here. And I got this cutting from a friend in Hawaii. This is called the CFA Desert King. So it's from Australia, from a farm called CFA. It was such a small cutting, and if you try to root anything under 4 inches, the new growth that comes out of it is usually very young growth. So I didn't want to wait that long for it to mature. So what I did was this is a Delight rootstock. It had roots already. So I just did a cleft graft on it. And then within 2 to 3 weeks, I have this branch here. So technically this will fruit for me next season versus me waiting 1 season for it to grow and then hopefully for it to fruit the next season, right? And then there's something called seedling horizontal grafting. This, if you go back to my channel, this is my very first video I ever did on my YouTube channel. It's like, I'm all super awkward. I'm like, hi guys, I'm Richard. I'll show you guys, like nothing like this now. I really encourage you guys to start learning how to do this. If you guys are like, enthusiasts like me. Everybody has already well-known dragon fruits, but what's better than to grow your own type of variety, right? You guys are already pollinating your dragon fruits by hand, correct? You guys all know to go collect pollinate your dragon fruits. You guys are basically hybridizing without even knowing it yet, right? So if you guys take those pollen and you say, let's say you collect Ecuador Polora pollen, and then you go to, today I'm going to be showing you guys some of those grafts. So which ones do you guys want to see? There's a seeding graft. I could do a cleft graft, horizontal graft.
How about V?
V graft. Okay, we can do V graft. So V graft, I'm going to be using this tool. This is like the easiest way to do it. Okay, I have some rainbow here. This is rainbow cuttings, and we'll use like one of these here. Okay, I don't have a flat one, so we're gonna do a side one so I show you guys, because these ones are pretty rare to get. But when you guys do get it, it makes your V-graft that much easier. So start saving these. I know a lot of people cut them because they're just like, oh yeah, they're two-sided, they're ugly, like, I don't want it. But I look for them all the time, like, oh yes, I found one, you know? And then that's when I do this little Frankenstein with it. Okay. So some tools that I like to use when I'm grafting is paper tape. This is like one of my favorite tapes because they just stick so well. They're very easy to manipulate. Like when you're bending them, it's not too stiff and it's like very flimsy. And they're micropores, so they can still breathe in. A lot of times when I use other tape, it kind of like creates this like humid layer down there, and then like little fungus starts to grow, or sometimes even bacteria starts to grow because it's inside a bag when you guys are grafting, right? And that creates like a perfect like environment for bacteria to grow. So the micropore tape really helps, and it sticks very well because as you're grafting, these actually grow still, so they get plumper and plumper and plumper, and sometimes the tape will fall off. And then your graft hasn't fully healed yet, so they'll start to like move as they grow, and then your graft fails. And you're like, what happened? And then you see over here your side of your tape is like up like that, right? So micropore tape's really good. Always have alcohol pads. Clean your tools when you guys graft. Like a lot of my all the time. A lot of my successful grafts comes from just using sterile stuff, and I think that's the reason why my percentage is higher. A lot of times I will reuse this maybe once or twice. This is all sterile scalpels that I use. I'll wipe them with alcohol, and then after that, I just toss them away. Because you're spending all this time grafting, you want to just make sure you do it once right? Because then after 2 weeks, there goes 2 weeks, and then you finally find out your graft has failed, and there goes your graft. You have to start all over. Unless you're like me, I just graft a bunch of them, and then hopefully 1 or 2 of them are successful, and then they stick, right? So that's that. Bags. You always want to bag your grafts. My rule of thumb is 5 days. I like to do like 5 days for every type of graft that I do. Once it starts to heal, you will know. The callus will start to get dry. But if you touch it, open the bag, and it's still wet, then just leave the bag on for it to slowly start to heal. And then once they heal and they latch on, you can take the bag off, okay? We'll talk about how long to keep them in the shade, when to bring them out to direct sunlight, and what to look for if you see that they are successful, okay? So let's go ahead and start a V-graft. We'll just be using this tool, and then we'll get some tape ready. So before I do any graft, this is like my first chore. I just start getting a bunch of tape, and I cut them into little tiny pieces, and I just leave them right next to me. Versus when you're like grafting and then you try to get tape, it's a mess. You're just like, wait a minute, I'm not even ready, you know? So over here, so Diego, this is the graft master too.
So Richard, where do you get this tape?
This tape you can get anywhere, any CVS stores, Rite Aid, I think any pharmacy store, they have it.
I think Richard steals it from the hospital.
Oh yeah, I work at a hospital, so they get
Leftovers, yeah.
They know. So first, take some tape. I like to use scissors a lot of times. I know people just tear them, but when you tear them, they kind of do this. So when you're kind of like putting them down, it's kind of crooked and it's just harder to latch. What I do is I'll like put them to the edge here. And then I just start cutting. I'll do little thin strips. Depending on how big your graft is, you can see how big you want to cut it. But I cut all sizes. I'll do like little ones, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I have variety to choose from. So then I'm like ready. The thing with grafting is you have to do things pretty quickly because you're working against time. You leave it exposed too much, then it kind of gets calloused up. The mucus parts start to dry. The whole point is we want to get those mucus to combine with each other and dry with each other, versus that layer on top drying and we put it together, they're just gonna fall off in the future, right? So let's cut some tape here, and we can go ahead and start on a V-graft. And in before, I think if you guys seen my YouTube video, I used to have this other tool. It's a pumpkin carving tools or fruit carving tools, and it comes like a V. I used to just take that and poke through. But when I did that, I felt like it was harder for me to line it up in the center. So when this started coming out, this was so helpful because they have a hole right here. You literally can see like where you're gonna cut. So I'll show you guys once we get started, okay? Let me get some more tape cut.
I didn't know what's going on in here. I was chatting over there.
Oh yeah, there's 2 groups going on right now. Okay, so let me move some of this stuff. Let me find a good one to be grafts with. This is the good one. So when you're doing seeding grafts, like I really like to use young growths like these. because the juices, the cambium is not as thick, so when you're cutting them, it's very easy. The juices are still kind of young juice, so the hormones are the same. So when they grow, they blow up. If you guys ever notice, people do graft on straight cambium, and then if you guys notice the people that do grafts on these new growths, the new growths always grow bigger, because these are the new ones with the new hormones that they're just releasing, versus the old ones, they don't really focus too much growth in there. So every time you guys graft, if you guys can, use new growth. They are the best. But in this case, we're just gonna try to get one of these to graft. Okay, so when I start a V graft, what I do is like sometimes if it's late at night, I take my flashlight and I'll like beam it through the dragon fruit cutting. And then sometimes, it's too sunny now, but at nighttime you can see these lines. So those are the veins that you guys want to try to, so Kevin, that you guys want to start cutting in, okay? So let me look here. I don't know if you guys can see, but I can see this vein right here. It kind of pops up. You guys want to see? Yeah, those are the yeah, you want to align it as best you can to the center of that vein and then cut there, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Another thing to note is once you graft them, make sure you draw like an arrow so you know which way is up or down. There's so many times I cut it with the V-cut graft and I put it down, I'm like, oh my God, which side is up and which side is down? So I had to come back and like measure. I was like, okay, this side's up. So what I'm gonna do is I have my marker with me. And I'm just gonna find, let's see, something to match this side. I think I like this one right here. Something flat and easy and plump. I like this one. So try to find something as straight as possible. And when it's kind of wavy and curvy, it's still successful. It just makes it a little bit more challenging for you for your first time, right? So I like this one right here. I'm gonna draw an arrow up. This way. I have my tape ready. And now this is where we use this tool. But before I use this, I'm gonna wipe it with some alcohol just to make sure it is clean. And this is a great way to really maximize your grafting material. Say, like I said, you go to a store, you see some farmer that messed up and he left a piece on. You're gonna grab that and you're gonna go home like, I'm gonna graft the heck out of this thing. You're gonna just like, you know, get like 4 pieces off of a node.
It's my variety now.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you're a farm. I have it in my backyard now, you know. That's why my mom is so amazed. She's like, don't they sell this in the stores? How did you get those? I was like, I bought it from the store and I grew it. And she still doesn't understand what I do to the day, my mom. She's like, how do you get all these dragon fruits, you know? Every time I come, I see you have more. Okay, I cleaned it. So let's go ahead and cut it. So I'm gonna cut this first. I like to use, so growth usually starts from the top. And after I graft this, I want to take this off because a lot of the energy is now focused on this. But once I stop this, it's gonna figure out a new way to go there. What I would do if I really want to focus only the graft to grow in that certain area, I would cut off every single one of these nodes here, because every single one of these spines here has potential to grow a new stem, a new growth, right? So you want to limit that and just make it focus all of its energy only on that one part that we graft. So when you guys cut it all off there, all the energy will just go there, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna choose this one here because it's really nice and pronounced, really dark. So excuse me for 1 second, guys.
Oh, now I see.
You see it now, right?
Yeah.
You see that dark line?
Yeah.
See how the sun is beaming there? That's the vein right there.
Oh.
So your goal is to try to get that vein as best as possible. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm probably gonna cut about, let's see here. Nothing too crazy. I see that it's centered in there, just like that. Give it a nice wiggle. And if you guys get close, I see that vein right there. It's that really white circle spot right on there, okay? So now that I see that exposed, that's the vein that the cambium layer is gonna start growing from. Right there at that dot. Now we're gonna go ahead and quickly, you guys wanna work fast, okay? Get that on as soon as you can. So now I'm gonna go in here, grab one of these nodes. So you see how the possibility of one cutting can turn into like hundreds, if you guys can do it right. Okay, I like this right here.
This is how you make 100 Sour Patch Kids.
Exactly. Joseph's telling me I better get to work. All right, I got it in there. Arrow is pointing up. I see in the middle that is the white cambium layer there. So what I'm gonna do now is just match it in here as best as possible. Okay, And you want no air gaps. You see how I lined that up so good in there?
Yep.
Just like that. Okay?
Okay.
We're gonna leave that there. Get your tape. And now we're gonna do some taping. Okay, I want to make sure that it's center as possible before I do it, tape it. So I like that. So I'm gonna start with the bottom. Squeeze it as tight as possible and tape. And your goal is just to make sure there's no air gaps, because if there's air gaps, they're gonna heal with that air gap and it starts to slowly release. But if it's tight, your chances are higher, okay? So here's another one, just like that. Okay, so once I get 2 secure tape on, you're not done yet. You're gonna inspect it now to make sure that there's no air gaps. So I'm like this, I bring out my flashlight, I have my headlamp on.
Microscope.
Microscope in, zoom in, and now it's like, okay, what I do is I put my light in the back, and if I see light shining through, I know I'm not tight enough, so I gotta keep on putting tape. So I don't see any light, everything looks good, everything looks sealed. So what we're gonna do now is just secure it as best as you can. So that way, they do grow, because this node here will start to get plump, and once it gets so plump, it will just pop the tape off. So your goal is just to try to keep that tape on as best as possible. So you're gonna start seeing me do like all these crisscross taping, making sure it's tight, like that. More tape. Let's go a little bit closer to the center. This. And that looks good to me. So, since I already have tape and I don't want to waste it, let's use it all. There's never not too much tape, you guys. As long as you feel comfortable and you know your graft is nice and tight, that's what matters. It doesn't matter what people think, but when they see your graft successful, they're like, how did you do it? They're like, oh, that tape.
That is actually something new I learned today.
Yeah, oh, good,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad I'm showing you guys something that you haven't seen yet. Okay, there you go. All right, now we have, you want to tape it and leave the thorn out still, because that's where the new growth grows out, right? So that's good. Now that I have that grafted, we're gonna go ahead and take off this new growth. We don't need this no more, because now it's just gonna be sucking energy in there. Once you do this, how I explained it to people back in the day was, pretend this is a river, right? And each one of these are river slots for them to flow out. If you block all these river holes like a beaver, dam them up, it will force it where there's only a passage left, right? So keep it flowing that way only. If I would leave that on there, it would have kept going this way and never go this way. But now that I cut it off, it blocked that. So now the auxins, it's called auxin hormones. That's what plants produce to make them grow. Now all those hormones are gonna go this way. So once you do that.
Can you graft all this if you want to?
Yes, yes, I've done it where I put a different variety in each node, and then they'll grow all.
I do. They thought I'm crazy.
No, you can do it.
Frankenstein.
I have, like this one. This is a very good example. This is one dragon fruit cutting with 2 different varieties. These are 2 different seedlings. This is Asunta 5 crossed with Asunta 4 seedling, and this is a red Laverne crossed with Asunta 4 seedling. So 2. The 6 is how I did the same thing with the 6. I grafted 2 6, and that's how I got Asunta 6 and Wild Berry Skittles. But they're in the same rootstock. Because I grafted them on the same rootstock, they both fruited at the same time. So that's the bonus of grafting multi-grafting on a rootstock. Once one like start to go in the flowering phase, that whole thing is going to start flowering. You just don't know which way it's going. So really recommend it. If you guys do multi-grafts, put a bunch of varieties on there. You're gonna have, like, you know, those fig trees where people have like 10 different varieties on there.
Yeah.
Dragon fruit can do that too. Most I've done is 3 grafts on one, because I feel like anything else than that, they grow very slow. So I do like 3 different types of varieties on there, and then they will fruit at the same time. You know, so that's a really good question that you asked there.
Richard, which variety is good for rootstock? Is there some strongest one, like Vietnam White, Laverne?
So what I tell people, it can be different for everybody else, right? In our environment, Vietnam White grows the best because it's just an established fruit here that has been passed around, and then their genetics has been ingrained in this weather.
Right.
It could be different for, Pakistan. It could be different for Vietnam. It could be different for Thailand. Whatever you see that grows very well in your environment, use that rootstock.
I see.
And pay attention to the cambium layer. Some varieties, their cambium layer can be very small, so it makes it very difficult for you to try to match those up. different. I thought different like cactus.
Well, yeah, you have different.
Disclosure that I have to make. So I got most of my cuttings when I started from the Irvine station, the research station that the project runs by Ramiro Lobo. Then Ramiro was here. Well, they lost funding. They didn't have a lot of funding, so basically the plot there, it looks really bad. I mean, they have maybe a couple plants that are alive. Everything else is dead. So he was here getting more cuttings to restart the project. Get new funding now.
Start off with the white. We have a close one like that.
Free of that, free Dragon Fruit.